WakeUpCall with Dan Tortora, on-site, on location in our Travel Heritage Health Studios. We are here at the AAC kickoff in Arlington, Texas, not too far from the headquarters of the American Athletic Conference, and that being in Irving, Texas. And I am here with the new Commissioner, Tim Pernetti, who's no stranger to the broadcast, and happy to be sitting with you here in the same room. How are you?
Good to do it in person,
Yeah.
right? It's better than the virtual thing, for sure.
Absolutely. And so you had the opportunity to address in a lot of ways here at the AAC kickoff. I know that there was our virtual press conference, and there was something, with the American when you were announced, but this being at the kickoff for football was really a huge introduction, the grand one, so to speak. How do you feel that went this morning, and kind of what you wanted to get across and the message that you wanted to send?
I thought it went really well, and what people have to remember about Media Day is so much of the work is done in advance of getting to the podium. And it's been 50 days of learning for me, listening and naturally staying up to speed on the bigger industry issues, but really just getting under the hood with our stakeholders, because the first 50 days for me have been about creating stakeholder alignment. Like, are we aligned as a conference? As we talk about new business opportunities, like how do we feel about these things? I understand the impacts, but maybe I don't understand the impact for a coach. Yeah. So when we got up there today, I think it was the culmination of a lot of really good discussions. And we had a great coaches meeting until 11 o'clock last night after dinner, and talked about some real things facing us. But what I love is that's a coaches group that's dynamic. Like, they're going to get out there and try to beat each other up this year, because they're all chasing the same thing, but they're in it together and trying to make this a powerful conference.
And that dinner that you had and that powwow in the first night of the AAC kickoff, just why that was so important for you to do that with the coaches and what you did get out of it.
I think any commissioner's job is, you have a variety of things that you're out there to do, but you're a voice on behalf of coaches, student athletes, all your sports. And so to me, I'm never going to step out there and talk about anything that I haven't vetted or at least understood the point of view of our stakeholders. That's why alignment is so important. And listen, you have 14 coaches. Like, not everybody's going to agree on everything, but when you get in the room and talk about it and have some debate, you ultimately can all compromise and land in the right place.
And for you, was there any thing or two that came out of that meeting that you felt really good about, saying, okay, like you said, you got 14 different coaches, so not everybody's always going to agree, but was there a piece or two that you felt like there was alignment pretty much throughout?
Yeah, there's alignment on a variety of things. First and foremost is everybody supports the idea of new business enterprises that can help to generate resources and revenue for the institutions. I think everybody also supports that, all these comments get taken out of context, but supports the idea of all right, what's going to happen with revenue sharing? Who's going to opt in? It's too early to call any of that because we don't even have a lot of the detail of how the settlement will come down. But we do expect and are going to require everybody in this conference to invest at a minimum level. Like, we have to all give ourselves a chance at a minimum level to say, hey, we're all where we are. For some institutions that have wherewithal beyond that, then they have the ability to do that. But if we're not all investing at a certain level, then we're creating our own inequity, and I think we want to avoid that.
And I asked you, when I had the opportunity with you standing up on stage in your address to not just the people in the room, but the people around the world for the American Athletic Conference, I asked you about that seat at the table. I'd spoken with Mike Aresco about it when he was the commissioner for so many years prior to, of feeling like when you're sitting, not only to have a seat, because that was a big thing that Mike and I spoke about, was just getting in the room, but being at the table is one thing. The bigger thing is, once you're at the table, are they listening to you? Mm-hmm. Is this a room that is looking at their cell phones when the American is talking? Is this a room where someone's walking out and going to the bathroom or having a side conversation? Or do you feel like when the American is sitting at the table that there is an actual focused listening to what you have to say?
I do. At least that's been my experience. Like, I haven't been in the room nearly as much as Mike was in the room. We were in the room together in April, and then I've been in the room a couple times since then. Despite what everybody thinks, everybody in that room is trying to listen and develop solutions. Now, do some of the solutions sound better to some than others? I'm sure that they do. Yeah. But there is not a lack of interest in what anyone has to say. In fact, people are encouraging each other to speak up so we can get a wider view of what's going on in the industry. So, it's been great. I also think the benefit, Mike had it and I have it, is all of these commissioners I have pre-existing relationships with from years in media and in college sports. So when you step into something and you're already acclimated, you can hit the ground running and actually try to talk about what's really facing us and embrace the change. Like, this industry resisted the change for a long time.
Yeah.
And that's where the failure to modernize came in. But we still have an opportunity, if we get through this settlement, to try to set forth a model that works.
There's 9 FBS conferences, 9 in Division 1A football in college, with the PAC not being there anymore. Power, group, I've never been a fan of either. As Mike always talked about, it was a media term that was created that divided the 10 conferences at the time, 5 here, 5 there. What do we need to do stepping forward when you talk about embracing change, looking at the enterprise as a whole? How do we need to address the FBS instead of having this great divide between what we consider power and consider group?
I do think the media, to some extent, fueled that debate. But I said it earlier today, there are certain monikers that will never come out of my mouth because they're just not true. They're essentially been manufactured. But the reality is there's 9 FBS conferences competing at the highest level of college football. Could you clearly point out or have a debate about who's competing at what level within that ecosystem? I think you can. But college football, remember, as an enterprise, it's become hugely valuable because conferences have their own agendas, their own plans, their own advancement strategies. But commissioners, since the beginning of time, have been willing to move the industry forward together as an enterprise. And that's created a creative value for everyone. The prospect of it moving away from each other and in different directions, it's unhealthy.
Yeah. We talked about expansion the last time you and I spoke, and you get asked about that. When the Big 12 had not taken from the American, there was this world where the Big 12, when they lost Oklahoma and Texas to the SEC, I had actually a couple of years ago written an article about how the American could have been a huge part of the breaking away of the Big 12, and the Pac-12 would have survived it, the Big 12 wouldn't have. And then after that, when we look at what happened to the Pac, when Cal and Stanford were still trying to figure things out, I spoke with Mike about it, Oregon State, Washington State. This is the American Athletic Conference. It covers from sea to shining sea, because that is the name. So you're in so many markets already. How do you address who makes sense? Is it media market? Is it trying to have geographic rivalries? Is it saying we're not in this part of the country, let's get in this part? Is it looking at the history of a program? How are we addressing, and with the 22% in the settlement, are we looking at schools that can afford certain things? How are you addressing expansion as far as the criteria?
Well, I think, as you can imagine, there's not a lot I can comment on there, but what I would say is all of it. It starts with establishing your own criteria, but all of those things are important. You put all those things in a blender, right? I think geography matters. It's starting to get away from everyone how insane some of these moves are given geography. Like, student athlete experience maybe needs to get put back in focus. Like, is playing in a conference when you're on the East Coast that involves members on the West Coast, is that a healthy solution? But I do think that's kind of where we've arrived as an industry. But geography and student athlete experience are going to mean a lot in the conversation. But certainly the goal of expansion since the beginning of time is look at the timing, look when it happens. It's tied to the end of media contracts. It's all about creating new value. So value has a lot to do with it. But to me, alignment's got to win the day. Like, you can find institutions that can generate value, but if they're not aligned with who you are as a conference, the likelihood is it's not going to work.
And you have had the opportunity to do some things differently. One of the things you did at the AAC kickoff for the first time ever, well, it got rebranded as the AAC kickoff. So first, your thoughts on the rebranding of the name, and then secondly, your thoughts on why fans were given an open door policy this time.
Yeah, so I think, the first thing we've been spending our time on is brand. And to understand your brand, you actually have to talk to your constituents about your brand. And we're in the midst of a brand study with everyone on the campuses, people in the conference office, fans, trying to understand what it means to people. Because then and only then can you properly position it for the future. To me, media days should be fun. It's fun for student athletes. I think it's fun for some coaches, right? It's also something that they have to do. But to me, it was easy. I said, if we're trying to do something different, let's get EA here and let's partner with them and let's have the game. And I even raised my hand. I said, I'll play against one of the student athletes, but let's create an environment where fans can hang out. They can see the players. They can listen to their coaches. Let's just provide access. What's the secret? It's a media day. They may be sitting at home watching it. Why not give them the chance to be in the room and have that experience? So this is the way we're going to operate. You know, the thing about sports that everybody loves is they want access to it. So
Yeah.
we're going to provide access however we can.
Like you said, 50 days in.
Yep.
Now that you do a lot of these conversations when you're at the headquarters, right? And these teams are going through their practices, they're going through their summer workouts. Coaches just had a couple weeks of vacation time. This is where you get to be in the room and actually have a pulse on the room. How do you look at, now that we're toward the end of the AAC kickoff, what is the pulse of the room? What did you feel of the heartbeat with these faces in front of you, these fans in front of you, student athletes, as well as coaches and representatives from each of your member institutions?
Optimism. It really feels, that's the way it feels. There's real optimism about the future of the conference. I mean, it's impossible to ignore what's going on around you. I think everybody's monitoring all the other discussions, like what's going to happen in other places. Someone asked me today, so, well, you know, what about the ACC? I said, I'm not the commissioner of the ACC. My friend Jim Phillips is the commissioner of the ACC. My job is this conference. But certainly we're all paying attention to what's going on around us. But there's real optimism around it. And I think that goes from the fans all the way through the media into our membership throughout, even with some of the newly joined members. It's exciting. And I think people are ready to do things differently. Like, why not talk about some of these things? Why not try some of these things? What's the worst that can happen? They don't work out and you move on to the next thing. Like, taking some risk is something that this business is hungry for.
I don't know how much you can or cannot say about this, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
All right, you're going to do your job and ask.
I spoke with Brian Newberry, the Navy head football coach, about, I said, Army's coming in, Air Force is the only one not in, so do we just make that call? His response was, I don't think that was necessarily off the table, maybe in the grand scope. I don't know what timing or when,
Yeah.
but is that a thought that you're named the American? You have 2 out of 3 of the military institutions represented now. Air Force?
Yeah, I think it's an easy one for people to speculate on and fuel the rumor mill. You know, what I would say to you is, I made a business, even back to my days at Rutgers, you know, while we were working on some solutions long term, we never discussed it.
Yeah.
You know, I just think with things like this, especially in this environment, is if conversations take place, then those conversations take place, you know, in a proper way. But for us right now, like, I'm focused on what's in front of us, which is like adding Army is a huge step. It really is. Like, I experienced playing there multiple times. I know what that means. I experienced playing in Navy multiple times. I know what that is. The academies have a national value to what we do. And as far as like opportunities in the future, I'm not going to speculate and fuel the rumor mill on that stuff, because that's really all it is.
We played rapid fire before. We're going to do it again.
Let's
here
do it.
Round out today's show. You get to ask the questions.
I get to ask the questions?
Yeah, so I'm not putting you on the hot seat at all because you've answered all my questions, as you
All right.
always do. So
Have you played the EA college football game yet?
I wanted to sneak over there and play it, and I didn't get a chance to yet. So I was saving up.
What are
my
we, in
time.
Congress now? This is a yes or no answer. Yes or no?
Well, I will say that I watched a very terrible hearing with no answers to yes or no questions, staying up last night and seeing that. So have I played it? No. Do I want to? Yes.
Okay.
I'm happy it's back.
What is your biggest concern about the expansion of the postseason in college football?
Oh, that's a good question. My biggest concern is the fact that the 5 automatics do not get treated the same. The top 4 do, the 5th does not. The 5th could end up being a 12 seed, which is ridiculous. And I think, and this is my opinion, but the college football playoff, I have long been, as you know this, banging the drum about the American, not just for the sake of banging the drum, but because I've been with this conference from before a name and a logo, and I saw the value because I know the people. I've seen them go up against getting no respect and responding with tremendous optimism and hard work and winning championships and putting themselves in a good place. I think Houston had a place in the past. I think UCF had a place in the past. I think obviously Cincinnati had a place in the playoff, but had a place the year before that. And now as we step forward, I think my biggest issue is they say that it's fair because on paper it's written that way. But the Big 12, the ACC, the Big 10, and the SEC, I think most people think those are going to get those top 4 based on the rankings that we've seen historically, which means that the American and everybody else is going to be fighting for that 5th which means that you're not going to get an automatic bid, which is wrong. You're going to have to potentially play on the road, and to be considered a 12 seed and say, okay, the American did what everybody else did, but they have to play their whole series they have to do everything on the road. They can't play at home. They're going to be the underdog the whole way through. This whole just be happy that you're there in this new model, I think, is ridiculous. And I think the American, the Sun Belts, the MAC, Conference USA, and the Mountain West have a gripe, and I understand it. And I will continue to bang that drum home because, yes, progress is great, but progress for the sake of progress without having actual identifiable change is wrong.
Is the Dome Ranger the most misunderstood mascot in college sports?
The Dome Ranger. I would honestly say the Stanford Cardinal being a Christmas tree really throws me off as to what any of that means. And I also was speaking with Tom Herman, and I said, you're one of 3 owls. And he took a step back and he goes, you know what, I never even thought about it.
How about that?
So Mike Bloomgren said that for Rice they do this, but I said just point to you after. So he did this and that, and then I asked what FAU does, and they said they do this, and then I asked Temple, and Stan Drayton said, like, we don't have a hand gesture. We're just going to knock you on your butt, and that's the way that we show ourselves.
I like that answer. All right, last one.
Yes.
Who's got the best uniform in the league?
Man, I got to go to mascot for that. I am so hard pressed. Lisa Campos would call me a liar if I said anything else. The Roadrunner's so cool.
It's a cool logo.
And I remember reaching out to her. And by the way, we have gone through what you actually meant this morning because you mentioned Lisa Campos, and then you said future commissioner, and she said he was mentioning my son Christopher when he said that.
I mean, he was dressed like the future commissioner.
But some people were thinking that you meant Lisa, and they're like, okay, what does that mean? And I said, listen, take that as respect for your job, but knowing Christopher and WakeUpCall being the first place he's ever done an interview, I can honestly say that he's probably going to be hunting for your job down the road.
He will. He's primed. So enjoyed it, Dan.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, dude.
Once again, the Commissioner of the American, Tim Pernetti, here with us, always giving us time, and thank you for being transparent, for being candid, and doing what you do.
We'll do it again soon.
Thank you, sir.